Now, a new initiative to expand Africa's participation in voluntary carbon markets has been launched at the COP27 climate summit, which of course is currently underway in Egypt's Sharm El-Sheikh. Led by a 13-member steering committee made up of African leaders as well as CEOs and carbon credit experts, the African Carbon Markets Initiative plans to support the growth of carbon credits production on the continent. Now, the bold initiative also hopes to create jobs and protect biodiversity on the continent. Already, a number of African nations, including Kenya, Malawi, Gabon, Nigeria, and Togo, have shared their commitments to collaborating with that initiative in order to scale up carbon credit productions via voluntary carbon markets activation plans. Now, the initiative announced a bold ambition for the continent to reach about 300 million carbon credits offered annually by 2030. And this level of supply is expected to unlock about $6 billion in income and support about 30 million jobs on the continent. Now, earlier we discussed the initiative's plan to scale Africa's voluntary carbon markets with one of the project's steering committee members, Ivan Duque. He is the former president of Colombia. Take a look.
First thing that I want to highlight is that the Africa Carbon Market Initiative is a major milestone because this is going to scale up the opportunities for more countries to present projects that can be financeable through carbon credits, and obviously, and the most important thing, to create opportunities for rural communities, for indigenous communities, and allow them to be active participants in the carbon markets. And I have to say that the opportunity is very big, and as is said, the sky is the limit, because currently only 5 countries in Africa represent something close to 65% of all the carbon credits that have been emitted.
But there are a lot of questions around how exactly we're going to make carbon markets work for Africa. For example, and you alluded to this, one of them is the parameters around the time it takes to generate those credits, and certainly how projects will be verified in order to qualify as a carbon credit issuer. So how exactly do you plan to make that work?
Well, part of my responsibility as member of the steering committee has also be to present part of the experiences that we saw in Latin America. And as you know, Colombia has one of the most dynamic carbon credit markets within our region. Obviously, there's still a lot of things to fine tune and to improve over time. But what I want to highlight is that we have to see the possibilities in a variety of projects. So first of all, if you move fast in what is called the High Ambition Coalition for Nature, and more countries declare 30% of their territory protected area from now until 2030, those areas that are declared protected will have the contribution of the local communities to effectively protect and be able to present that protection out of the carbon that is captured in order to generate resources for those communities. So that's one example. The other example has to do with energy transition. The case of Colombia demonstrated that we could pass from barely nothing, 0.2% of our energy matrix, to 20% if there's political willingness and the incentives are there. So for those companies that decide to invest in generating more energy through solar and wind, they can also be active players presenting the offsets that those projects generate so that they can also get financing derived from the carbon credit market.
And on that note, let's delve a little into how you plan to determine the quality and also a fair price of Africa's carbon credits, especially one that is high enough to deter investments in fossil fuels, which is a big issue now, but also applied in a way that does not kill off trade and jobs on the continent. How would these payments actually work for African economies?
Well, I think you highlight a very important point, because the most maybe relevant objective that has to be determined in the course of the next years is how do we have a fair pricing of the carbon that is either reduced or captured, especially in the global south. And I think that's something that we have to set with market criteria. And I'm pretty certain that we will get there. If you ask me, do we have a fair price today worldwide? I would say no, because there are still many challenges. But I think this kind of initiatives also provide the possibility to start fine-tuning and define the best price. Now, what you well said, we have to advance in the carbon credit markets, but we have to be clear that the energy transition cannot be detrimental to the societies of the global south. And I can also give you the case of my own country. My own country produces fossil fuels. We produce oil and we export oil. But when we look at our energy matrix, more than 89% of the matrix today is run by hydro, wind, and solar. And that means we're less intensive in fuels for electricity generation. We export a lot, but we are also turning our national oil company into a reference model of sustainability. And now it's the largest auto generator in Colombia as a company with non-conventional renewable energies. But also it's also participating actively in the recovering of nature and biodiversity, reforesting, afforesting, and those kinds of projects can also be financeable through the credit market. But you point a very important element. We have to see development in Africa, but we want to see sustainable development in Africa. And that means that the carbon credit markets have to enter to become a new source of income, a new source of opportunities, and not a detrimental figure that would harm the possibilities of communities to keep on improving their way of living.